remember when the world ended?
The city of Sioux Falls even hired a Y2K planner and
prevent a Y2K meltdown.
The turn of the millennium brought about a global fear, all because of a computer bug. Why, though? Was the fear warranted, and what spawned from the not-so-sudden disaster? Well, an issue arose 42 years prior. In 1958, Bob Bremer noticed an issue within the programming of computers. You see, computers were extremely limited on memory, so programmers shortened the year to only 2 digits. This caused the turnover of 1999 to 2000 to read as 1999 to 1900. They did this not just to save memory, but because they didn't expect the shelf life of their code to last 4 decades. But it did. And as a result, hysteria ensued. Would the banks run, utility systems fail, records become corrupt? Fear grew wider and wider spread as people realized this one small bug could cause the world's infrastructure to collapse. The 80s are when people began to take notice of the millennium bug, as the brokerage industry took notice and began to sink millions into countering the effects. It still wasn't a huge issue to the public yet. There were still 2 full decades to avoid catastrophe, but what was getting done? In the United States, technology teams began working around the clock to check and patch software systems in every single crevice of the softwares being used. Bill Clinton signed the Y2K Information and Readiness Disclosure Act, which offered protection to companies to share data about Y2K.
We have completed work on more than 99% of all mission-critical computer systems.
In Europe, the European Commission issued a warning that their efforts to solve Y2K-related issues were falling insufficient, and that the armed forces were on standby to help the population if the infrastructure began to fail. In 1998, the UN held its first international conference on Y2K to share information in hopes to help the whole world become better prepared.
Simple transition from one date to the next could either paralyze our civilization or just confound simple systems.
Whether it was the world's governments, a family-owned business, or a huge megacorp, nobody was safe. By the end of it, an estimated $300 billion was spent in the efforts to save the world. All of these efforts by the big shots in charge were causing the populace some concern, though. Then, as the year 2000 grew closer, panic. News stations began circulating that the end is near. Religious groups leveraged the situation to get people to save themselves, and doomsday preppers began buying shelters and survival goods. There's one thing you can always count on: death, taxes, and people capitalizing off of fear. Y2K survival kits began getting sold, and people were buying them in truckloads. After all, if the world is going to end, you want to be prepared. Survival programs began circulating, with drills to become more prepared being the focal point of a lot of preparations. Oh hey, there were some more unique things that spawned from this era. Things like fashion. Bold. Vibrant. Justin Timberlake? Focal points of this style were zip-off pants and baggy jeans, eyesores of graphic tees, bright tracksuits, and so much denim. Y2K fashion ended up being iconic in a way. So iconic that it's having a bit of a resurgence 23 years later. Synthwave and Standout aesthetics spawned in fields like graphic design, gaming, and architecture. Art styles featured a lot of thick and bold iconography. Everything started looking like what was imagined to be the future. Blobs became a thing too. This revolution in art didn't stop there, as it began to take over the music scene. Electronic music saw an explosion, and a ton of new bands and subgenres became noticeable. Not all is bad in times of crisis, and as we know now, nothing too bad ended up happening at the turn of the millennium, thanks to the efforts by the governments and workers who busted their ass to avoid seeing the collapse of the world as we know it. Most of the issues created from gaps that weren't able to be filled in time were inconveniences at most. Some funny, some not for those affected, as newborn babies were registered as 100 years old, some systems failed for a couple of hours, Japanese nuclear alarms brought some fright, and a German man became a millionaire, temporarily. The end of the world ended up as a new beginning for different fields of media and styles, and now we are all able to look back at this as an underwhelming overreaction. Overwhelming underreaction? Who's really to say if it could have really been the end? Thanks for watching.